On this episode of American Land Seller, we're joined by Brian Reynolds of Agri-Affiliates in McCook, Nebraska. Brian is a member of the Nebraska chapter American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers, also the Realtors Land Institute. He is licensed in Nebraska and Kansas and started his real estate career out with the Board of Education Lands and Funds. He was the area field representative of 7 counties in southwest Nebraska, and this included managing both irrigated and dryland, cropland, and grassland. He had responsibilities like conducting lease auctions, improvement appraisals, collecting rent and land comparables, evaluating real estate taxation, and other various management activities. He started with Agri-Affiliates in 2015. He's a professional farm and ranch manager and a real estate salesman. Their main office is there in North Platte, Nebraska, same as ours. And his general responsibilities include management and real estate sales and service for farms and ranches in western Nebraska and Kansas. So we're happy to have Brian join and tell us all about farm management today. This is something that I'm incredibly fascinated with, and I hope you guys are too. So as always, we hope you take something away and find value in today's podcast. Hello everyone, my name is Kobe Rickardson, and welcome to the American Land Seller Podcast. We are so excited you decided to join us today on our journey to discover new and interesting things about everything land, from sales, investments, ownership, regulations, and so much more. Our mission is to connect you to the top folks in the country where it has to do with land, so we can learn more about everything from agriculture to land development.
Okay, Kobe and our special guests, let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome to the 8th episode of the American Land Seller Podcast, and we have a great guest today. I've kind of gotten to know this guy over the last year. He is an incredible land broker, but really what we have him on here for today is to talk to us about managing farm and ranch real estate. It's one of those things where you love him or you hate him, but he's gonna explain to us why we maybe have the wrong opinion of the farm manager. So with us today, Brian Reynolds from Agri-Affiliates. Brian's from McCook, and Brian, how we doing today?
I'm doing good, Kobe. Thanks for having me on.
Man, it's super fun to see you. Just a little disclosure, Brian and I, we were out at the National Land Conference together and had a great time meeting with some of the top people in the country. So, but that was a good time, didn't you think?
I thought it was great, and I got to meet a lot of good people. And congratulations again on your ALC. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. No, that was fun, and hopefully you're working on yours. Maybe thinking about doing that. It's a big commitment, but I know it's a pretty big reward when you're through it.
Well, that's hats off to you for getting me involved. So appreciate that. So.
Yep. Nope. Super excited. So tell me a little bit about Brian Reynolds. What's your origin story, buddy? What made you get into real estate? Kind of where you from? Are you a Nebraska native or where are you at?
I'm a Hazard native. Everybody knows where that's at, I'm sure. Big town of 68 people there north of Kearney. I guess I was kind of more into the farming stuff background, a little bit of cattle. But I went to college at Curtis, Nebraska, and in my summertime, I interned for agronomists, did a lot of agronomy work, and I kind of thought that's the field that I was going to go into. But, life changes, and I ended up going to school in Oklahoma, sure. And I kind of transitioned out of that and went into pharmaceuticals right out of college. And kind of similar story to Jeff Barrett.
Jeff Garrett, yeah. That's what I was just thinking. I was like, holy crap, you guys are twins.
And which is, that's kind of a bad deal. I got to follow him. He had a really good podcast with you. So
hey, he did have a good one. He's a fun guy.
He's a great guy. Would love knowing him. So, yeah. But no, I did. I worked for a pharmaceutical company. I actually was the warehouse salesman and ordered all the supplies and stuff. So I started from the ground, kind of worked my way up as, I was the warehouse guy, and then I went to be a salesman, traveling salesman for a few years. So, and then from there I went to the state school land in 2006, and that's where I started my management role. So I managed 7 counties for the state school land, and that was about 112,000 acres that I managed for them. Wow. So, and that kind of got my feet wet. So,
yeah, was most of that school land? That's pretty. That could be a whole podcast on its own. So there's lots of different. I don't think people know how much land the school actually owns. It's a ton, isn't it? I mean,
at one point, I don't know where we're at today. Where they're at. At one point, they were the largest landowner in Nebraska at 1.2 million acres. Wow. So, and that's pretty much from Kearney West. There's not a lot of school land back east anymore. So,
right.
So
yeah, and I think they're trying to maybe sell a little off once in a while too. I've seen more and more of those sales come up. So, but that's a huge project. So you got into land management kind of from the school stuff. Can you just there's going to be a lot of people that are listening that probably understand exactly what we're talking about when we say land management. Can you just, for the dumb ones like me out there, can you just kind of give us like kind of a 60-second elevator speech on what it is and what exactly it is you're trying to accomplish by managing land for people?
Well, I think that's a loaded question a little bit because everybody, anybody you're going to go work for, Kobe, has a different goal in mind. It's not a one size fits all, and I think sometimes that's a little misconception on a farm manager or somebody has something set that this is what we're going to do it, this is how we're going to do it. Sure. I think the biggest key, I think, in farm management is to sit down with somebody and have them set out what their goals are. What do you want to accomplish? Short term, long term. There's a whole gamut of things that go into play there. And then once you guys got to get on the same page, and then you kind of see where we want to go. Right. So I think that's kind of how I approach it. Right or wrong, But yeah, farm management is a pretty broad thing because we do a lot of things inside of farm management, to accounting, to leases, to different things. It all depends on the owner and what their goal is, really. So
sure, and it's good to hear you say that because I think especially in our industry, you've got a lot of pretty hardcore folks that are like, this is the way we're going to do it, and and so. It makes my heart happy when I start hearing some land folks that are like, let's figure out what the customer's goals are. And I mean, the people I'm talking about that just a little bit, and they're smart, capable people. But I think you're right. I think you got to figure out what exactly is the right thing for each individual client. So speaking of setting the goals and stuff, like, let's say I'm a new client, you're meeting with me for the first time. What does that look like? Like I've got me and my brother and sister, we own a quarter of irrigated farm ground in Lincoln County. Like what kind of things do you go over with people?
Typically, a little bit depends on, like you said, your goals, but how do we want to lease this out? I set these out. Do we want to do a farm lease on a bushel rent? Do we want to do cash rent? Do we want to do a share deal? You want a little risk in this too? When you're talking with some elderly folks, they say, no, we don't want that risk.
Right.
Hey, Brian, we want to know every March 1 and November 1, this is what we're going to get for rent, So some people want to be a little more aggressive. Somebody want to do some bushel rents, and then, like I said, you got the other people that want to do just cash. So it's I'm going to lay all this out for you.
Sure.
Here's how I'm going to approach it. I'm going to say, here's a flex lease, here's a bushel lease, and then, how's this fit? You guys talk about this. Does it fit what you guys want to do? So,
right, you're explaining that to them, because a lot of people listening to this aren't going to know what you're saying when you say a flex lease, or the different kinds of leases. Like, I understand what you're talking about, but so like basically with a flex lease, that's where you're like basically getting paid on a bushel average or something, like that kind of, is that?
Yeah,
it's not a set you're going to get 200 an acre for however long.
And really, I'm not going to go too much into a flex lease,
right,
because it works a little bit better, Colby, back eastern Nebraska, where it rains.
That's a great place to live, apparently.
When it's drier, it complicates things, and the yields are down. I don't do a lot of them. We do more of a 1/3, 2/3 share, or a 40/60 share, where we can share in the seed expense or fertilizer expense or something like that.
Right.
But then I also, we do if we're doing a share, we're doing bushel rents. I'm gonna market that stuff for you. So I'm gonna do the whole thing for you. So you don't have to, that's all handled by me, and I will get a hold of the elevators and market that all for you. So.
Yeah, and that's. I think let's. This is probably a good spot to take a break, but maybe we can dig more into like that and the other side of this break, and just talk just a little bit about like what's the crop marketing look like, and then also getting into more like right now. I know. It's really important to be paying attention to what's going on with pastures the last few years. So maybe we can just talk a little bit about how you're monitoring and writing leases for pastures. So, let's catch that after the break, and we will be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Remax Home Farm and Ranch. Remax Home Farm and Ranch is the premier marketing and selling real estate company in Nebraska and South Dakota. You can find all the great Remax agents and their listings at homefarmranch.com. That's homefarmranch.com. You can look up and see what they're up to and follow along on all the things that they have going on. Once again, this episode is brought to you by Remax Home Farm and Ranch, and you can find their listings and their agents at homefarmranch.com. Once again, homefarmranch.com. Hey, we're back here on the American Land Seller Podcast with my friend Brian Reynolds from Agri Affiliates. He's out of McCook, Nebraska. So if you're needing some, and I do like I do leases and stuff like that, but I do very little management. So if you're wanting to know how to do it right, probably ought to get a hold of Brian. But yeah, we do, like I said, we do some leases for folks, and that seems to be working out pretty good for us. But let's dive into the intricacies of, well, first of all, let's talk just a little bit about how do you build a relationship? I mean, this is kind of, you're taking care of somebody's big asset here, Brian. Like, how do you create a level of trust with folks that are wanting you to manage their property?
I'm not going to lie to you. It really comes down to is gaining their trust, and that doesn't come overnight. I've took over quite a few farms from the previous manager, and it takes 2 or 3 years. It really does. Yeah. And this doesn't Nebraska football, prove it. So it's one of those things that you gotta stay in front of them. You gotta give them, information. You gotta give them results in which they gotta, the farms gotta make money, and you gotta keep up with the reports. And the biggest thing is communication. Let them know you're trying and you're doing your best, and that means a lot. But it just takes time. It really does.
Yeah, and I would imagine that this is probably one of those goals or one of those gigs that it's tempting to want to hide under your desk some days, but probably the more proactive you are and out in front of, hey, this is going to happen, you probably ought to be awake and paying attention. I don't want you to be like being, watching Fox News and calling me because oh my gosh, fertilizer prices are going to be 100 times bigger next year than they are this year, type of thing, right?
That's correct. And we I manage farms for business people too. That we're kind of that buffer between the tenant and the owner. I got some local people that are they're totally capable of managing their own farm or doing stuff, but they don't want to cause that conflict. They don't want that. So I'm that buffer. And it just makes their life simpler and everybody's, I guess. So, and not only building that relationship though with the owner, you got to do that with the tenant too. And the more you guys can work together to get, accomplish everybody's goals, the easier things are too. So, you working with that tenant and he says, "Hey, Brian, what do you think about, putting out an end tower on that pivoter? We're developing that. We got extra water, and does that make sense?" So, and the right tenant too in play can make your life a lot easier too. It's not always about, hey, if the high dollar wins, it's the guy that fits. Is he taking care of my equipment, and everything else? So,
right. Well, and having the answers for people. I mean, I know you're not gonna you're gonna be too diplomatic to bring this up, but different folks living in different parts of the world are going to have different ideas of what a farm is. So so somebody from the University of such and such in Chicago or like New York or something are going to think, hey, we probably ought to be organic farmers and that kind of stuff, whereas that land just isn't going to be conducive to that kind of farming, correct? I mean, that's got to be what some of it is.
Yeah. I think, you see it in, in real estate sales where they say, geez, Kobe, that's worth way more than that. I mean, here in New York, they're worth, it's like, no, that's not the case here, It's not practical in this area, and so you got to kind of explain that stuff, so.
Right. And so being the expert on the land in the area is extremely important, I would imagine, for this gig, correct?
Yeah, what Nebraska is. It's very diverse. I mean, go to the sandhills, the grass up there, to Binkelman, Nebraska, where it's really sandy and dry. And I mean, and then you don't have to go very far east, and the values and the land changes. The practices are different. I mean, it's Nebraska is one of the most diverse states. It just changes. And
then you have places like Gothenburg, where within a 60-mile radius of Gothenburg, Frito lays here, so you get some contracts that are pretty steady and lucrative, or even around York, where they're where seed corn's made, or Grand Island, or Kearney and Grand Island, like those places where you have a bigger profit. Yeah, that's totally a good point. Let's dig just a little bit into what, so I know I don't do any of this, but I know a good part of your job is paying attention every day to what's fertilizer prices, what's crop, what are crops worth today, what is there, and again, you go back to talking about goals. I'm sure one of the goals you're setting with your guys that are sharecropping is, okay, what do we want to have pre-sold? What's our bottom, that kind of stuff. Talk just a little bit about what goes into creating a marketing plan for the sharecropping guys that you're working with. Well,
I always try to do better than I did the year before to start out with. I have a spreadsheet of if I'm selling corn, I have all my tenants' fields in there. I have it's a spreadsheet built by each individual owner. It has, projected bushels. It has everything in there. And I look what I did last year. I look what I did 2 years ago, and I'm looking at the markets, and I'm saying, hey, we started selling last year at 540, and I have the opportunity to start here. If that's my lowest sale, not a bad sale,
Sure.
And I'm always trying to get better, but then I use and the rest of the farm managers use a marketing outfit that we go by as a kind of a guideline. He kind of gives us some suggestions. where things are, soybeans and the wheat and stuff. And also, you have other farm managers you can use. Hey, Steve, I'm kind of thinking, about selling corn here. What do you think?
Yeah.
It's good to bounce things off of people, and it's, nobody knows everything, and not even the marketers. So it's good to get a different feedback from different people.
Right. That's why there's hedging, right? So
right.
You can always I think that was all created by you farm managers, wasn't it? So you can say, well, I told you to hedge early.
No, and it's, in talking about the fertilizer and stuff, I don't mean to go off on you here, but it is good that we have the relationships with the Frenchman valleys, the egg valleys, the different people.
Absolutely.
And it goes with that, with the irrigation people, and having, several farms you manage, you create that relationship where you like, oh, I know a guy, I know a guy that can come out and get that fixed sooner, than later, and so it's, I think having a big network really helps in what I do. So
yeah, absolutely. That would, and again, I would hope that with a good relationship, I would hope that the guys from the fertilizer place are going to be calling you saying, hey, Brian, we're looking at, probably a big increase in the next couple months. You might want to think about locking some stuff in.
right.
So that's definitely. So let's talk a little bit about like crop versus pasture, like cropland versus pasture. We've talked about it before. We have kind of similar, I think, as far as production times in our lives where we came up with a little bit of farmland, a little bit of cows, in our, I never have been, a full-time producer, but I grew up, working on a farm. I grew up working with cows. So, talk just a little bit about, what's the difference, between managing a pasture and managing maybe a irrigated farm?
Well, the pasture versus the cropland has its own different set of challenges and circumstances to deal with. You're dealing with some of these pivots and stuff that I manage. Water's a big deal. We got to manage. We try to, for a level of production, but yes, we're also trying to manage a resource.
Sure.
It's like, say this year, we're going into a new allocation, but yet we're kind of behind the eight ball because we pumped too much on too many farms, So this last fall, we planted some wheat on some pivots to get ahead of that game, Going over the pasture, that's just brutal. That's probably one of my biggest challenges was last year, trying to get guys turned out on cattle last year because they were out of hay, but knowing, hey, these pastures are pretty short,
Right.
So it was a tough year, to be a farm manager, leasing out grass last year. It's hopefully this year is better, but and working with pasture though, I do a lot of trying to do a lot of management with pipelines, making sure we have cedar tree control on some of those that have cedar problems. Trying to enhance that as much as we can, make it more productive. Can we eventually put a few more head out there? And the name of the game in this whole management deal is to make the owners money. So, and are we current with the rents? And if there's a project coming up, equipped or whatever it is with the FSA or whatever, we tried to make that an option for the landowner. Maybe they don't want to do it, but let them decide that. So,
Sure. Well, I think that's a great time. Like, once again, I think it's a good time to take a break and come back, and maybe we'll do a little bit of talking about the government and how much fun it is for farm managers to deal with the government. But we're going to take a break, and we will be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Remax Home Farm and Ranch. RE/MAX Home Farm and Ranch is the premier marketing and selling real estate company in Nebraska and South Dakota. You can find all the great RE/MAX agents and their listings at homefarmranch.com. That's homefarmranch.com. You can look up and see what they're up to and follow along on all the things that they have going on. Once again, this episode is brought to you by RE/MAX Home Farm and Ranch, and you can find their listings and their agents at homefarmranch.com. Once again, homefarmranch.com. Hey, we're back here with Brian Reynolds from Agri Affiliates in McCook, Nebraska, and talking about managing properties, managing farms and ranches today. And I know, as we kind of mentioned before the break, I know that one of Brian's favorite things to do is deal with the government agencies that are involved in this, because we all love that. So when you're working with a client and the Farm Service Agency, the FSA, talk a little bit about what that's like, what kind of, making sure you're on top of the programs that your guys qualify for and stuff like that.
That kind of goes back to having good relationships with them. I try to treat all the ones that I deal with very good because they're like having, good secretaries. They keep you up on stuff. They'll send me emails and they say, "Hey, Brian, you forgot to do this or something," But I will stop in there as much as I can, though, and keep up on that, because there's deadlines, for the, PLC art, dates, that stuff's due. But I always try to, I get their newsletters and stuff like that too. But there again, the farm managers, we communicate together too, if somebody's heard something, about what's available. But, that's another group that I try to stay connected to. I deal with several different ones in different counties, but I always try to see what's out there and what's current and what's most practical.
Sure. Well, and that's, that's the trick, isn't it? You got to bring those guys treats and make sure that they're happy with you. That's why I always tell people, like the first time when we go harvest corn and I was driving truck, I'd make my wife make some cookies and make sure I drop those off at the scale for them because, a lot of times if I'm in a hurry and I ask him, I could get just can you dump me in the elevator instead of going all the way over to the pile for the next 2 weeks. But so yeah, taking care of those people and making sure that you're keeping in contact with them is huge. So with that kind of transitions into what kind of reports and stuff and what kind of timeline do you obviously throughout the year you're checking on stuff pretty consistently. What kind of guy I expect from you as far as what kind of monthly or reporting or stuff like that you're doing?
Yeah, we try to, this time of year, we're trying to do a pre-plant. We're going to send out some reports right now, getting ready to go out. Kind of explaining, hey, we're going to be planting this, we're planting corn, talking about commodities we're planting, and I'm also trying to finish up on a few grass leases right now. And some of these I've had to increase the rent a little bit this year. But I'm going through there, I'm just going to explain them where we are. This is the income. Some of these I'm doing early cash flow. I'm doing some enterprise budgets right now.
Sure.
So they can see what that looks like. Here's our fertilizer costs. These are these costs. And I'm probably going to be waiting until the corn gets up, 5 leaf or so. Then I'll probably get out there and take some pictures. I'll probably be going out as far as the pasture stuff, probably another 30 days at least before I start getting too excited about that. To have a better idea. That's just been too warm or too cold.
Yeah.
It's been
so you cold. Guys are liars. And gotcha.
It's been too cold to, see where we're at, kind of hoping on the grass side of things that we're not going to see a lot of grass that physically died from the drought, which I know we'll see a little bit, but hoping we're not having a lot of bare spots. So, then when that corn gets going, the crops get going, we'll follow up probably another report, in June, sometime in June, kind of, here's where we're at, And I like to try to put in, some of that, some weather charts, this is how much rain we got in May, or this is, along the way, especially like last year. I mean, having the any rain report or having some kind of deal in there, they're going, oh, that's why things look so terrible. It's not the farm manager necessarily. So, it kind of, and pictures are worth 1,000 words, and people always say that, but that people like to see, I try to get out maybe they're planting and I can go get some pictures and send to clients, of out there planting and doing some of that. And so it kind of brings them to the field, brings them to where you are, and it's kind of nice. Maybe you want to send a video even. So that's kind of neat too. So
sure.
And same thing with when I go to harvest and stuff, I try to get some of that stuff incorporated, in there, some video and stuff. So,
yeah.
But that's kind of the spring stuff, I guess, Kobe. But.
No, and when you deal with real estate, farm and ranch real estate, it's kind of fun because you literally are in a period of time where you're writing contracts on the few stuff that we have out there available with the idea that, hey, we're not going to want to play with going to the closing company or anything and tell them, at least after the 1st of June, which is a little different than, what our house seller, partners in crime, they don't really care.
Right.
So like you're talking about getting out there and taking pictures and stuff like that, just on a timeline. That's kind of, I never thought about that. Just to wait until there's something growing out of the dirt for your Chicago people to, to see. And I always like going out and riding in the planter and watching them do it. Like my dad still has some land that we kind of help him out with. And so I like to go out there and bug those guys and kind of get an idea of how planting's going or harvest is going and stuff like that. So, but yeah, taking a video riding in the planter would be kind of cool too. Well, let's see what else. What haven't we covered? What about making improvements on land? Is that something that you do recommendations on? Hey, you probably should put 3 90 bushel bins up and that kind of stuff. Is that 90,000 bushel bins? I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, put one on every pivot corner.
That's probably not now. I mean, corn's been above $5 for quite a while, so it's.
Well, that kind of goes back, a few years ago. The government had some pretty good interest rates and stuff on putting up new bins. So that's something I did pitch actually to some landowners about that because we had really some pretty decent deals. But no, I think the biggest thing is it might be a pivot. It's one of those things where we budget every year for something. In a lot of these places, Kobe. I mean, it's hey, we know that
smart.
pivot. We know that pivot is in 1974.
It's
whatever it is. Yeah.
Watch it.
But I mean, whether it's a sprinkler package or what it is, we always try to look ahead. So the worst thing that can happen is you kick the can down the road every year, and the next thing you know, you're sending your owner a $80,000 bill or a $90,000. It's one of those deals where if we can kind of keep up on things, that's what we try to do. And the same thing with fence. There's maybe some owners, we like to build a 1/4 mile of fence every year or so much fence. So that way, we're not looking at a completely dilapidated, pasture, the fence is kept up. But, the times that we're in right now makes that a little hard. Trying to find fence supplies, $15 line post, it's kind of changed the dynamics a little bit of, new pivot, but we're still looking ahead and we do what we can and try to make what makes most sense. So.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Making sure, the thing I think, and I'll create a little value for you just from the sell side of stuff, just being a marketing guy for real estate, is if I have a piece of property that's been managed by a property manager, by a farm and ranch manager, and if they know what they're doing, then they can give me the book that they have put together from what that guy has done over the 10 years or whatever they've been managing it. That instantly creates more value than somebody that, well, Joe the farmer's been kind of managing it for me and he pays me this much a year, because Joe's really, really not going to be too excited about me asking him what he's been doing and stuff like that. So, I mean, just right there is value, because if you go to sell it, guess what? I have really good records on what we've done, and the realtor doesn't have to go spend 3 years trying to find all that information. So,
no, we keep all that, and we have hard copies, a lot of stuff, and electronic, lots that stuff's in there. So, I guess it's something we never really talked about, Kobe, but it's another kind of a service we provide, though, is accounting side of it. So all these bills that come in, I have coded each one of them. I've looked over each one of these bills, and if it's herbicide, I got it stamped herbicide. This is for corn, and when all that's put together, whether they do a quarterly or monthly statement, that's sent out to them. So at the end of the year, they can hand all that stuff to their accountant, and it's a load off the owners, saying, man, that's all I have to do is hand this off, and it's done.
Right.
Brian kept track of the seed, and we can also run reports. We can say, hey, how much did I spend on herbicide this year? Well,
right.
It takes about 2 seconds, and we can give that to you. So I think there's value in that too. Just knowing, hey, I know what this costs. I know what I've been paying for this. So.
Yeah. What other kind of a consulting do you guys do? Do you just, as far as, I'm sure that you have no problem with families, that are transitioning probably. That's probably a big part of what you get calls on is, grandpa just died and now we got to figure out what we're doing with the land type of stuff. Do you get some consulting calls on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I actually have worked a couple different times on a big ranch up by Dunning. I went out and put it's around 12,000 acre ranch, I think.
Wow.
And I broke that all out for him to make it a year-round cow-calf unit, and broke out the hay meadow, what it can support, the upland support, and made a book for him. And that way he kind of has an idea, and it's good for for future use. This is where you're lacking, because of water sites. This is your softer spots. We need to probably destock here.
Sure.
So, but and it's probably nice to even have somebody put that together for even somebody that's familiar with the ground, is because they said, "Oh, I never thought of it that way." It's another perspective to look at it that way. So, yeah, we do different. There's all different types, of wants and needs. We know what, anytime we can help somebody, either, rents or, consulting work like that, it's, we have an open door. So.
Perfect. So does, I guess last question or second to last question, you feel like being a farm manager has helped you out with your real estate sales?
I think it has a lot. I think it helps you, answer some better questions when you're sitting down with a seller, and it helps you, like for instance, like a pivot, you're asking more about, hey, how much is, what kind of common bowls does that have in it? Is it 1,000 gallon? Is it, all the stuff that you have to deal on a daily, basis as a farm manager, you're able to ask that, and so, and I think it's been helped be a good listener. Too many times a realtor or anybody can go in with the guns blazing instead of taking the time and pumping your brakes and listening.
Sure.
Because nobody knows that piece of ground as well as that guy that owns that ground. So if you listen, you can learn a lot. So.
Yeah. So Brian, how do I get a hold of you? This is the trick question for the day. How does a guy, if they want a farm manager, now anybody listening to this, if they want their land sold, you better call me. But no, if you're interviewing, I would like a shot. That's what I always say. You can give Brian a shot too. But if you're trying to get a hold of Brian, what's that look like?
My cell phone number is 308-380-5734. My office here in McCook's 308-345-7200. Or you can email me at breynolds, that's BREYNOLDS @agroaffiliates.com. So.
Perfect. And AgroAffiliates website is agroaffiliates.com, correct?
Correct.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to be on here today, Brian. I know you're a busy man, and hopefully this wasn't as painful as maybe you thought it was going to be.
It was good. It was good.
I try and not make it tough. I didn't even, there was no questions about politics or anything. So, I mean, I feel like that was it was a good deal. But appreciate you being on, and that is all for us today. We will see everyone else down the road. You have been listening to the American Land Seller Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us this week for our program, and we promise to continue to try and find new, exciting, and informative things to discuss every single time. If you would be so kind, please like, subscribe, or follow whatever works on the app you're listening or watching on. We would love for you to keep track of what we're up to. Thanks again, and until next time, God bless you. Have a great week. Today's episode is brought to you by Remax Home Farm and Ranch. Remax Home Farm and Ranch is the premier marketing and selling real estate company in Nebraska and South Dakota. You can find all the great Remax agents and their listings at homefarmranch.com. That's homefarmranch.com. You can look up and see what they're up to and follow along on all the things that they have going on. Once again, this episode is brought to you by Remax Home Farm and Ranch, and you can find their listings and their agents at homefarmranch.com. Once again, homefarmranch.com.